Why is it that most of the diets you see on social media these days just simply do not work for you? They're not sustainable. They require you to cut out the foods that you're kind of accustomed to eating that you kind of need to eat, and they affect your energy levels in a negative way, and there's just no way you can stick to them. Well, I have a whole thing prepared for you today that goes down and actually analyzes all of the popular diets. Check this out. We've got an analysis of all the popular diets: keto, low carb, intermittent fasting, vegan, plant-based, carnivore, paleo, all these fitness influencer diets. We're going to break them down and explain why these haven't worked for you in the past if you've tried them, so you have a little bit of clarity on that, and why they don't work for Muslim professionals as a whole. Because the thing is that obviously you work in a profession that is very demanding cognitively, stress capacity wise, everything else. And a lot of these diets, especially the low carb ones, the highly restricted ones, they just affect your stress in a very negative way, both biologically and psychologically, such that they are not optimal by any means. And on top of that, there are much better solutions that actually improve your stress capacity, your energy levels, everything else, so that you're, going to get the best of both, the fat loss side of things and the energy side of things, which is really the goal. So we're going to analyze these diets for energy levels, cognitive performance at work, mood, especially around your family, focus, sustainability, efficiency as well, hunger and cravings management, hormonal impact, and then of course the short and long-term health considerations. So let's first go into a very popular one that you've probably tried before, which is keto and low carb. So a couple of the advantages of keto and low carb is that it helps you to drop a lot of water weight. It can help you to get into a calorie deficit. It can reduce your appetite in the short term, and it can slightly improve your energy levels and give you more consistency of your energy levels in the medium term, and can sometimes improve insulin sensitivity in the short term, although any calorie deficit and weight loss, approach will do that as well, especially when we're using the complex carbs and, fibers and lean proteins approach, which also improves your insulin sensitivity when coupled with the right exercise regimen that we talk about a lot on this channel. So the cons, though, is there's actually a lot of cons to keto, which is why I'm very against keto, and I might even do just a whole separate video breaking this down even further called Why Keto Sucks and Why You Shouldn't Do It. But essentially, some of the big cons. A lot of the weight that you drop is water weight. That's why in the first week or two you drop like 10 pounds, but it's not really actual body fat, okay? So when you come off of keto, inevitably, because it's not sustainable, you're going to gain a lot of that water weight back. In addition to that, in a Muslim household, whether you're Pakistani, Arab, even African, even, if you're a revert, whatever it may be, no matter what, every culture likes carbs. Every culture likes bread. Almost every culture likes rice. Many cultures like noodles. I mean, no matter where you're from on this earth, we like carbs. And even when Allah sent down food from Jannah, it was manna wa salwa, and I can't remember which of those was a carb, but one of them was a carb source. So to cut out carbs is not realistic, and one could even potentially say that it's not Islamic, because what did Allah send down? He sent down the quails and then the carb source, which I believe was either some type of grain or some kind of, whatever it might have been. You can go search that up a little bit later. Even when Allah sent down the foods, Allah knows what works best for us, so he sent down carbs and lean proteins with some healthy fats as well. So, of course, this is not going to be realistic. And to tell you a story, because I've done keto a couple times, I've done low carb, I've done carb cycling, I've done a lot of these things. I mean, I've been doing this for 15 plus years. So the first time I tried actual just straight up keto, I think it was something called the anabolic diet, which is basically just keto repackaged on this blog that I used to read when I first started getting into working out and health. And so I remember that there was one Ramadan where I was doing, keto. I was trying to lose as much weight as possible. I was like, I'm going to combine the fasting of Ramadan with the keto approach, and it's going to help me control X, Y, and Z. I had all these theories, and unfortunately it didn't work. And of course, when you're eating with the family and there's these delicious breads, these crunchy things. So I'm half Pakistani, 3/8 Algerian, 1/8 French. And so in Algerian culture, we have something called burek, which are like these crunchy rolls. Of course, Pakistani, we got samosas. In every culture, you have bread. So I couldn't eat any of these things. I got so mad. And unfortunately, it caused me to behave in a way that I regret around my family, because I was so irritable that all these people are eating these delicious crunchy carbs. I've been fasting all day and I can't even enjoy carbs. Now, regardless of whether it's Ramadan or not, when you're fasting and you're all grumpy because you can't, when you're low carbing and you feel all grumpy because you can't eat these delicious foods that we're accustomed to eating, it creates a lot of resistance, and it's not sustainable, and it's not optimal either. You actually need carbs to fuel your metabolism. So this is just, I know that these keto people tell you you're going to control your insulin, etc., but any calorie deficit will improve your insulin sensitivity. Weight training improves your insulin sensitivity. You can fix your diabetes and reduce your A1C and get off the meds, or prevent yourself from ending up down that path if you're at high risk of it, as we talked about in the last video, by simply just improving your diet in other ways without having to do something drastic and unsustainable like cutting out carbs. Because if you cut out carbs, you're inevitably going to rebound, you're inevitably going to binge. You've probably had that happen to you before, and that's just going to make your health worse than if you have never done anything at all. So don't start something crazy like that. Be sustainable, be realistic, be smart, be intelligent with it, and I'm going to explain the alternative as well. Now, some other downsides to keto, just to go a little deeper to it, is that if you lose water weight, it could fool you to think that you're doing something right. But over time, your fat intake slowly creeps up, especially as your appetite goes up, because on keto, they tell you, oh, eat as much fat as you want. Your insulin levels are low, so it doesn't really matter. Calories don't matter. No, calories still matter. And if you're going to do keto right, you do still have to control your calories. Even, the top keto influencers, and this whole video is about why the influencer diets don't work. But there are some successful keto influencers, and there are people who get results with keto. The sustainability is debatable, but there is a small percentage of the population who actually does better on keto for the longer term, but it's a very small percentage of the population, less than 10% of people. So there's 90+% chance, possibly as high as a 95 to 99% chance that if you're watching this right now, keto is not ideal for you on a biological level, on a sustainable level, on a psychological, physiological, every level you can think of. It's not ideal for you. Okay. And so obviously the top keto influencers, though, will tell you do still need to control your calories, because at the end of the day, you can't, break the laws of physics. Allah created this universe in due measure, right? Allah created this universe in perfect proportion. He created the laws of physics, which govern this universe. And of course, by Allah's permission, anything can happen. But, if you look at most people who have failed on keto, there was no divine intervention that saved them from failing on keto. Okay. So let's be smart about it and not use these, methods that don't work. Okay. In the long term, massive cravings come in, energy levels, focus, mood, everything, physical and cognitive performance suffer. Your gym workouts start to really go down. Your strength goes down. You could even lose muscle. You can't enjoy your favorite foods. Long term, it can mess up your hormones and increase your cortisol, actually reduce your insulin sensitivity over a longer term, can mess with your thyroid hormones, can lower your leptin, which is a satiation and fat burning hormone. And when your leptin goes down, your metabolism slows down, your cravings go up. It can actually even lower your testosterone, largely because of the high cortisol and everything else. And there's a risk of muscle loss, which is going to slow your metabolism down further and make your physique look worse. Okay. Now, if you still want to utilize some low carb days, you could do something called carb cycling, where you have high carb days, medium carb days, and low carb days. This can work, but that becomes very complicated. And as a busy professional, you don't really have a whole lot of extra time and cognitive energy to devote towards a complex approach to fitness, nor is it even necessary. What I prefer, and I'm going to talk about this later in the video, is the complex carbs, lean proteins, and fiber, low fat approach to create a deficit, which in some ways is the opposite of keto, but in some ways is similar in that it produces a deficit, which is how keto done right can be successful. I know somebody who's lost 50 pounds on keto. Again, they're one of the anomalies, but you probably also know a bunch of people who did keto, lost 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds, and then gained it all back and more, possibly including yourself, which is part of why keto is just not ideal. Okay. So let's talk about intermittent fasting. Okay, so intermittent fasting, all of us like the idea of it because as Muslims we fast, right? But when we fast for the sake of Allah. We're not necessarily fasting for health, although there are some health benefits to a little bit of fasting. I should have put the hadith here, but there is even the same hadith I've talked about in other videos that encourages you to make sure that you're taking care of your sleep. The Prophet ﷺ also told us to fast some of the days and eat some of the days because your body has a right on you, and fasting chronically for too long, too much can actually put a lot of stress on your body to where it does more harm than good. So that's why it's also important to be careful with intermittent fasting. And remember, when you're sunnah fasting, do it for the sake of Allah, because if you're just fasting for the health properties of it, you would be drinking water. So that's how I remind everybody that when we fast for the sake of Allah, we're fasting for the sake of Allah, which is why we cut out the water in addition to the food. Okay, so that way we know we're not doing it for health purposes and ruining our intention. But anyways, back to the intermittent fasting, which is different from sunnah fasting on many different levels. So there are some advantages, right? It can get you in a short-term calorie deficit in most cases. It's harder to eat in a calorie surplus when you're doing intermittent fasting, and it's easier to eat in a calorie deficit until the cravings kick in, which is where we get into the cons, okay? It can improve your energy and focus and reduce bloating and even improve digestion in the short term for many individuals, not just some, but actually many individuals. And it can be very easy and convenient to stick to, especially if you're very busy in the morning and it's hard for you to find the time for breakfast. Hey, you know what? It could actually be more convenient than some of the more optimal approaches physiologically, biologically speaking. Okay, physiologically, biologically, very similar, right? Basically the same thing. Point being, there are some things that are more optimal that might be harder to stick to than intermittent fasting. So I will acknowledge that it has that advantage. It can be very easy to stick to if you don't really have an appetite in the morning. Although, if you don't have an appetite in the morning, that might be a symptom of a larger problem, which is part of why IF is not ideal on a hormonal level, which falls within the category of physiological/biological. Now, another advantage to intermittent fasting is that it can allow for larger dinners and potentially even larger lunches as well, although be careful with that, because if you've been fasting all morning, your cortisol is up and that's where you're gaining all your energy from, and then you have a larger lunch, you're going to crash really fast. And you've probably experienced that before, and it can be tempting, especially at lunchtime, especially if, like, let's say you work in healthcare and the cafeteria doesn't have healthy food. Let's say you work in an office where people are always catering and bringing in food and it's unhealthy. There could be a lot of temptation if you've been fasting all morning. Even if you're a business owner and you bought some food for your employees, maybe you bought pizza for your employees one of my clients who has, mashallah, a large warehouse that he owns, mashallah. He'll sometimes get, pizza or catering for his employees, but then he gets tempted himself, right? So he needs to be careful. And likewise, we all need to be careful. Maybe you work from home and you're an entrepreneur, or, whatever field you're in, and there's all this decadent food ready to go. It can be very tempting if you're really hungry because you've been fasting all morning and you're feeling tired, which inevitably does still hit. The tiredness will still hit you even on intermittent fasting, especially when you do it chronically for a long time. Now I'm already going to the cons. Let me just finish with the last pro, which is the last pro of intermittent fasting is it can be very sustainable and easy for many people, especially, I already mentioned if you're busy and breakfast is a nuisance, and it can have some short-term benefits to your hormones. However, in the long term, it can actually cause a lot of damage to your hormones. And the first con, which is part of why a lot of people get stuck after a couple of months of intermittent fasting and stop losing weight, whether you last 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5, even 6 months, even more than that, eventually you're going to hit a plateau because the risk of metabolic adaptation is higher when you're fasting. And when your body falls into this category of metabolic adaptation, which essentially your body, after a chronic stimulus of weight loss, restricted eating, hunger, deprivation of nutrients, etc., your body eventually, and your leptin levels go down as a result of that. Eventually your body just says, okay, cool, we need to suppress energy levels. So that's why you get tired and you start feeling cold, and you start having less energy, you start having brain fog, you start feeling physically less active. Your body's trying to conserve calories because it thinks it's in a dire situation. Allah has created our bodies with the ability to survive famine, and this is part of why we get metabolic adaptation. Likewise, we can actually trick our body in another way, and we talk about that in the reverse diet video, which can help you solve negative metabolic adaptation as a result of intermittent fasting by getting into positive metabolic adaptation through the reverse dieting strategy that causes your metabolism to get faster. See, metabolic adaptation can refer to it getting faster or slower. Obviously, in this case, I'm referring to your metabolism getting slower, which is colloquially referred to as starvation mode, but in scientific literature, it's referred to as metabolic adaptation. And so what happens when that happens is that you hit a sudden plateau and it's very hard to break it. Your energy levels go down, your cravings go up, you start binge eating. Another detriment to intermittent fasting right off the get-go is it can absolutely, in most cases, increase cortisol, which is very damaging if you're already running a high-stress lifestyle, career, business, whatever field you're in, family, everything. You get stressed, and so your cortisol is already high, and it makes it worse. Hunger levels increase, and then in addition to your metabolism slowing, and then your thyroid and other hormones can get damaged in the long term, and you also risk muscle loss and further slowing and shutting your metabolism down, just like with keto. Your leptin goes down, which is your satiation hormone that is also responsible for keeping your metabolism, faster and healthier, which is why even on the diet I recommend, I still recommend a cheat meal once every 1 to 2 weeks, not only for sustainability purposes, but actually because it spikes your leptin and helps you burn more fat and stay more satiated over the long term. And psychologically, it's just nice. And then it also reminds you how bad it feels to be bloated so that it motivates you to stay on point with your clean diet otherwise. And we're going to talk about the better alternative. I'm just breaking down why these diets don't work, okay? Ghrelin goes up, which is a hormone that makes you hungrier. So your appetite goes up. And then if you have high cortisol as well, which also increases your appetite and your craving for high calorie foods, oily, sugary foods, especially at night, okay? Obviously, this is going to make you more prone to binge eating. And if you see one of my latest videos, I talk about, I think it was the last video I did, I talk about how to solve binge eating and then some other resources on how to solve that and a lot of the root causes. And one of them could potentially be intermittent fasting when combined with high stress and a busy, demanding lifestyle and a lack of self-care. Okay? Now, sleep quality also gets damaged by chronically high cortisol, so this can be an issue. So if you're waking up in the middle of the night at 2 a.m., sometimes you wake up at 2, 3 a.m. because Allah wants you to wake up and pray tahajjud, which is great, and that's barakah, that's a blessing. But if you're waking up every day at 2 a.m. and multiple times throughout the night, and you wake up and you can't fall back to sleep, and your sleep quality is becoming chronically worse over time, this is a scenario where we want to fix it, because even if you do get up and pray tahajjud and make dua every time that happens, and mashallah, you're making the most of it, you do need to fulfill the rights of your body per the hadith. So what if you could get better sleep and wake up for tahajjud, but not just because you woke up and you can't fall back to sleep and you're really tired and you're wired when you try to fall asleep at night, you get insomnia, you're tired during the day, the tired but wired phenomenon that happens when your cortisol levels are too high, which we talk about further in the cortisol masterclass, which is another video, very popular one on my channel. Why don't we take care of our health and our sleep and pray tahajjud by choice instead of because our cortisol levels are high and our health is poor, right? So just a caveat on that. So yeah, sleep quality gets damaged by high cortisol, which high stress plus intermittent fasting dramatically increases your risk of high cortisol, okay? Now, here's the thing is, another thing I'm going to go into in this video is how to get the benefits. So just like in the previous slide, I talked about how you can use carb cycling to get some of the benefits of keto minus the downsides. That being said, my other approach is a lot more sustainable than that. But if you want to get complex with it, you could do carb cycling. That's an option, right? However, If you want to keep things simple and breakfast is a nuisance for you and you want to get the benefits of the convenience of intermittent fasting minus the metabolism damage and the cortisol negative effects, then what you can do is you can do a protein shake in the morning, and you could potentially add a little bit of fruit to that protein shake. The combination of those healthy carbs and vitamins from the fruit and the protein itself is going to lower your cortisol, which is highest in the morning, which is going to be helpful and prevent you from having this cortisol spike and chronically elevated cortisol and then a crash of your energy and everything later in the evening. But if you've already damaged your metabolism through just chronic intermittent fasting and skipping breakfast, even if it's by accident, then we need to do a proper reverse diet, which I have other videos on this, which I'll either link below or at the end of this video, inshallah. Now, let's talk about vegan diet, okay? Because, and this one, you know, I actually hear more people asking about carnivore, which we're going to talk about, I believe, next. But you know, I hear everybody's tried keto, everybody's tried intermittent fasting. These are some of the most popular Instagram diets, but vegan has recently become more popular. And, you know, especially with this movie called The Game Changers, which actually miscited a lot of the scientific evidence that they quoted. SubhanAllah, it's crazy how they were able to widespread this misguidance. It's crazy. You know, these things can happen in science. They can happen in religion. I mean, just look at, you know, how the other religions became corrupted. It was through misguidance and people misspreading the proofs. But either ways, so and there's actually a breakdown of there's somebody you may have heard of named Lane Norton, this non-Muslim fitness guy who's very science-based. His content is great, however, in his breakdown debunking the movie The Game Changers and how the science was misused to try to justify veganism, even though, you know, none of those studies were actually really applicable and there's plenty of counter evidence. He does have a video debunking it. However, if you're a Muslim brother, I would be careful watching that video. You could potentially listen to it, but I wouldn't watch it because he has his ex-wife in that video and she is very inappropriately dressed and there may be some music in that video as well. So just be careful for halal versus haram purposes. So, but there is a breakdown of it, and if you're a sister, I suppose, well, even the way she has her aura uncovered in that video may even be inappropriate for sisters. So just be careful. You know, I don't want to get sins for sending anybody to that video, but there is a video. Just don't watch it. Listen to it, and if there's music in it, just leave it. Okay? Got to cover my Islamic liabilities there as well. But anyways, so here are the pros of vegan diet. It can lower cholesterol and inflammation in some cases, especially short term. And there is no need to worry about halal when you're eating out because you're not eating meat in the first place, but it can be hard to find good vegan places, which actually is even harder than finding halal, and it introduces a new challenge. You can get a lot of the benefits of vegan minus the downsides by following a fish-based diet, aka pescatarian, where you can still get a lot of the nutrients that you're going to be deficient in on veganism, and especially your protein and your omega-3s and everything else, as well as some of the micronutrients too. But there are some caveats to this too. But the cool thing with fish is a lot of fish sources are lower in cholesterol than like chicken and beef. So it can be helpful if you're somebody who's cholesterol sensitive. That being said though, there is a debate in the scientific community as to whether, you know, cholesterol is that bad of a thing if you're otherwise healthy. And on top of that, there are some people who, no matter how much cholesterol you eat, you won't have any issues. Like I had a client who, he's diabetic, so he still got the diabetic side effect. He was half Saudi and half Caucasian. And so he has an interesting genetic lineage, but it was crazy because even when he was, you know, 350 pounds when he first started, before he lost the weight, mashallah, and eating 2 to 3 pounds of fatty meat per day, he had no cholesterol issues whatsoever. The only health issue he had was, you know, diabetes and the associated conditions with that. So there are some exceptions where some people can eat a ton of meat and be obese, heavily obese, yet not have any cholesterol issues. But if you're Pakistani, you already have a 65% higher risk of heart disease. And, you know, if you're Arab, you have a higher risk as well. If you're African or African-American, you also have a higher risk. And if you're just obese in general, you also have a higher risk. Like if you're 270 plus pounds, which this brother, mashallah, was 350, yet he didn't have any cholesterol issues. So he was the exception to this rule, but he's the only exception I can think of. Every other client I've had who was over 300, even over 270, had some form of cholesterol issues. Even a lot of my clients who are in the 200 to 230 range before they start had cholesterol issues before starting, versus when you lose the weight, you clean up your diet, obviously it fixes it. But the point being, most people who are not, I can't even say most people, but there's some people who are not sensitive to cholesterol at all, dietary cholesterol wise. But if you already have cholesterol issues and your doctor has already told you need to bring it down, then you may be somebody who's sensitive to cholesterol to where you might need to be cognizant of your dietary cholesterol, versus if you don't have cholesterol issues, even if you're, you know, obese, overweight, and have diabetes, then you probably don't need to worry about your dietary cholesterol to where there's going to be no benefit whatsoever, or very, very little benefit whatsoever to doing a fish-based diet. So you can keep eating, you know, chicken, beef, just make sure you're doing the lean cuts. Okay. But anyways, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And fiber can help you bring your cholesterol down as well. Again, we're going to talk about the better diet to do at the end here, if you stay towards the end of this video. Okay. Now, the cons of veganism are the nutrient deficiencies. So vitamin B12, zinc, iron, calcium, vitamin D, omega-3, protein. you know, even if you get plant-based sources that have these, they're still not as bioavailable as animal sources. So this is still highly problematic. And in my course, I actually cover, which is a course, it's only available to clients right now, but eventually, maybe in 6 months, we'll make it available to the general public. But of course, if you end up becoming a client after watching any of my videos, you'll be able to access this much sooner than that. But we actually have a thing where we break down all the bioavailability, all that stuff. If you're somebody who wants to nerd out on the science, we also just have a fast track to success path inside the course too, where if you don't need to learn all the nerdy details, you can get the results as well. But either way, the course is not available yet, but the program is available. So if you are interested in potentially getting our help with your fitness and a better diet, custom tailored to you, and, you know, expert tailored feedback, you know, everything else that we do for our clients, just if you want a little more info, I'll attach the link in the description as well. But anyways, so you're going to have a lot of nutrient deficiencies on a vegan diet beyond just the 7 that I've listed here. Okay, these are just kind of the big ones, right? Another thing is you could potentially get fiber overload because you're going to end up eating a lot of fiber to where, you know, so too little fiber is bad for your digestion, your heart health, your insulin sensitivity, everything. But too much fiber can also be detrimental to your digestive system and everything else. So it's important to have balance in all things. In Islam, we know not to take the extreme road either way. So the same mindset can always be applied to our fitness. The same mindsets that make us successful in Islam and our careers and, you know, even the patience with our family and perseverance, whatever it may be. These things are the success mindsets that are universally successful across all fields. So you can take that mindset, as I talk about in the other video on transferring professional discipline to fitness discipline, and apply that to your fitness life as well and become healthier and fitter as a result. Now, other cons to veganism, it's not sustainable with your social life. So you can't really eat out a whole lot. It's hard to eat at family functions. People are going to call you weird, as they should, because you shouldn't be doing the vegan diet in the first place. You know, I actually have an uncle, my dad's brother-in-law. He actually says that it's haram to be vegan. Now, I don't know if that's actually, you know, true or not. You'd have to ask a sheikh, but, you know, Allah does talk about in the Quran how he created the animals for us to be able to eat and enjoy. And also, if you're vegan, you know, it's sunnah to sacrifice, you know, on Eid al-Adha. So you're missing out on a sunnah, right? So again, veganism is not from Islam. It's not from the Sunnah. Now, of course, the Prophet ﷺ, I believe there are some hadiths, and I need to find the authentic reference on like not eating, you know, too much red meat. But there are also examples of the Sahaba, who were the best generation of Muslims. There were some who ate meat every day because they were wealthy enough to afford it. Again, things were a little different back then, and now we have the luxury of being able to eat meat every day versus back then only the really rich people could. So be grateful for that. And if you're really rich and you're able to eat meat every day, great. And if you're, you know, not necessarily as rich, but you're still able to eat meat every day, alhamdulillah for the opportunity. Anyways, the point being, eat meat. It's good for you. Just be careful which meats you eat. And we're going to talk about that in a second as well, as we talk about on the channel. Now, vegan, other issues are long-term consequences on your bone health and muscle mass. Again, calcium and vitamin D deficiency, deficiency of other minerals, vitamins, protein. Your bone health and your muscle mass are at risk, and your risk of osteoporosis goes up, which as a man, it's not as bad as a woman, but, you know, for women 50 plus, especially, like, let's say your wife is trying this vegan thing, because a lot more women fall for this vegan thing than men, since men tend to be more into meat and less open-minded to vegan. But if your wife or your mom or your aunt or your sister or even your daughter, whoever it is trying this vegan thing, warn her about the dangers that women are already at risk of osteoporosis, especially if they don't do resistance training. But yeah, so if you do a vegan diet and you're a woman over 50 and you don't resistance train, you've dramatically increased your risk of osteoporosis, versus if you eat the animal-based sources of calcium, like, you know, you get your dairy in, and if you're lactose intolerant, there are some low lactose dairies you can do. And of course, you know, do your weight training, get your proper nutrients in, then your risk goes way down. Okay. And same for a man. If you want to not have brittle bones and brittle joints and joint pain and weakness as you get older, then you also need to do resistance training. And as a man, you're more open-minded to that than women, but even women need to. So get your wife on board too. In Shaa Allah, be that leader in your family so that you can benefit and have a legacy for your children, but also inspire your parents, also inspire, you know, your family and your wife and your kids and everybody. So again, there's a lot of benefits to this beyond just the benefits for you personally. Okay. So definitely it's not selfish to invest time, energy, and even money into your fitness journey, because it's going to benefit everybody else around you by investing in yourself. And we talk about this in other videos, but anyways, not to get on too many tangents here. So hormonal issues, your testosterone levels due to not getting enough cholesterol, not getting enough zinc, vitamin D, etc., are going to go down on a vegan diet. It's very hard to get enough protein without eating too much carbs and fiber on a vegan diet. So it's actually harder to get in a deficit with adequate protein to maintain muscle. And you can get, you know, a lot of the benefits on your cholesterol if you're worried about cholesterol by doing a fish-based diet. There are a lot of very low cholesterol sources of fish. If you want me to do another video on that, just comment down below and I can do a breakdown of the lowest cholesterol protein sources for those who are prone to heart disease, high cholesterol, etc. But Yeah, if cholesterol and inflammation are concerned, there's a lot of better things you can do other than this extreme vegan diet. And no matter what, you should still include some chicken and red meat into your diet in moderation, as long as it's the right cuts. Okay, so we went very deep into that. Let's quickly touch on carnivore. I actually get asked a lot of questions about this because it's becoming more and more popular as a lot of these viral Instagram influencers come out with their, funny carnivore videos from the supermarket and whatever. I'm sure you've seen them. I'm sure it's maybe piqued your curiosity, but there's something inside of you that instinctually knows that these gimmicky diets are not going to work for you, which is why you're watching this video where I'm, debunking all this stuff and telling you what you can and should do instead, inshallah. So, the pros of carnivore is it's simple, right? Just eat, only meat. Okay, great. It's easy to get your protein, and it can improve your insulin sensitivity short term, just like keto, but you're going to get all the same cons as keto, and the cons of having the absence of carbs, negative impact on your professional performance, your energy levels, increase potentially in cortisol, everything else. And it can be very hard to stick to, okay? Anything that requires you to cut out rice and bread and all that stuff is going to be hard to stick to, versus what I'm going to teach you how to do actually allows you to include those in moderation within reason. But most of our clients are eating rice every day, believe it or not, and still losing weight. And I'm not just saying that to sound gimmicky like all these Instagram influencer people. I'm genuinely telling you the strategy we use does, for those who like rice, have people eating rice every day. And if you don't like rice, you don't have to eat rice every day, but the complex carbs, lean proteins approach works incredibly well. Now, of course, we're doing basmati rice specifically, or brown rice, but in most cases, basmati rice, not like jasmine or calrose rice, or these high glycemic index rices, which we talk about, I believe, in other videos as well. But either way, carnivore is hard to stick to. It can also get expensive. And, if you're watching this right now, you're probably a professional who's doing well for yourself financially. So that's not your biggest concern. But at the same time, though, it is genuinely, you're wasting a lot of money when you could be following a diet that's more cost effective and better for your health. Okay. Now, of course, if you're prone to cholesterol issues, carnivore can be extremely problematic, especially if you're eating all these fatty meats. And if you still want to go animal-based, and you are somebody who gets bloated and inflamed from rice and bread, you want to cut them out already intrinsically, you don't like veggies, that's okay. You can go semi-carnivore, but even Carnivore MD, the most popular influencer with over 1 million followers who talks about the carnivore diet, he still includes fruit, berries, and honey in his diet. And there's actually a podcast where he talks about how his mistake going full carnivore was to not include those things. Now, he's still a little extreme, though, and even his diet with the fruit, berries, and honey is still not going to be 100% sustainable for us as Muslims because, of course, between our cultural considerations and the foods that we like to eat, there's other carbs associated there, but also with our cognitive and stress capacity demands, it is actually beneficial and more optimal to have complex carbs in your diet for metabolic and cortisol controlling purposes, such as basmati rice, sweet potato, oatmeal, lentils, beans, etc. These things can all be chickpeas. These can and should all be a part of your diet as long as they don't cause bloating or chronic inflammation for you. And if they do in large quantities, you can keep them in smaller quantities, which is better anyways. And if they do, just absolutely, you can cut them out, but you don't have to cut them out. And most people do not need to cut them out because in moderation, they usually do not produce bloating, only really in excess. Like if you eat 10 plates of rice, of course you're going to get bloated no matter how great your digestive system is, versus if you eat half a cup to a cup of cooked basmati rice and you don't have a specific food sensitivity to it, it's probably just going to improve your energy levels and keep them consistent and give you a nice sense of satiation and make you feel good that you get to eat that with a nice, 6 to 8 ounce serving of chicken that's cooked in a nice way that tastes good, maybe even some potato if you do my chicken biryani recipe. So again, there's a lot of nice things you can do that make it a lot more sustainable, that are all more optimal for your energy, your happiness, your health, everything, your metabolism. So you don't need to go all extreme with this carnivore thing, right? Now, paleo. Some of the pros of paleo is they can drop inflammation in most cases. They can help you to automatically make healthier food choices by following the simple rules. That being said, though, if you're choosing like 80-20 beef, that still has too much fat, even though it technically does fall into the paleo category. And most of the foods you're going to eat on paleo are nutrient dense. But the cons are, again, it's not sustainable in a Muslim household because they tell you have to cut out rice. What kind of Muslim is able to cut out rice? Very few of us, unless you just don't like rice, which some people don't like rice. It's a small percentage of the population, but we've had plenty of clients who don't like rice, so we don't make them eat rice. But if you like rice, yes, we include it in moderation, which makes things sustainable and effective. Okay. Another con to paleo is, again, as I mentioned, you don't always have to cut out rice and bread. Only if you have digestive issues or don't like the taste would you have to cut out rice and bread or severely limit them, but definitely not necessary to cut them out for most people, which is why paleo is a little too extreme in that sense and makes it hard to stick to. The more balanced approach is more superior, and you can take principles from paleo without it going extreme. So, I do like to look at a person's ancestry. For instance, So I've had clients from various regions of the world who had different dietary sensitivities based on what region they were from. I've had African American clients who couldn't do any dairy, right? I've had, you know, Pakistani and Arab clients who did really well on dairy, and I've also had Pakistani and African American and Arab origin clients who could not do well on dairy. So everybody's a little different, right? But there are some general trends, right? For instance, with Africans and African Americans, I find that the low-fat, complex carbs, high protein approach is even more, and the high fiber approach is even more effective for bringing down the cholesterol because they're at high risk of cholesterol issues. Amazing for their metabolism, amazing for muscle mass, etc. And I found this across the other groups too, but I found it's especially good for that ethnic group. I found that there are actually a lot of Pakistanis and Bengalis who can eat regular bread, even with gluten, even with GMOs, and not get any issues, versus there are others who are sensitive to it, such as myself. So there are a lot of, like, you know, genetic patterns. So again, we can look into your ancestry, your blood type, a lot of other things to generally make some assumptions about what is most likely to work for you. But there are always exceptions to these rules still, to where you still got to test stuff on yourself, as I may have talked about in other videos as well. So it's important that you, you know what criteria to look for when you're experimenting these things on yourself. So here's what works better for 90+% of our clients instead of these gimmicky Instagram diets, okay? It's simple, it's boring, but it works, okay? And it works really well and it's very sustainable. Lean proteins, complex carbs, fiber, and low-fat diet. So I like to go high protein, but use lean protein sources. I like to go medium complex carbs. I like to go, you know, fiber with every meal. I think of fiber as the chauffeur that you eat with your protein and your carbs to help it digest better. So you're having carbs along, or sorry, fiber along with it, so that when it goes through your digestive system, it has the fiber next to it to help it process better. Doesn't mean that you have to eat fiber with every bite per se. Usually only in severe digestive issue cases we have to do that per se. And then of course some people are sensitive to fiber, but in most cases, as long as you're getting your fiber in, your digestion is going to be much better. Your energy levels are going to be much better. It has so many benefits, alhamdulillah. And of course, I like 3 meals a day. If you need to do the smaller breakfast or just a protein shake with some fruit for breakfast, that's an option. As I've talked about in my strict but realistic diet video, I usually give people 6 options for breakfast based on their individual preferences and their lifestyle and everything else. And then, of course, we have realistic snack parameters as well that I talk about in that video as well. The realistic but strict diet and motivation to follow it approach video that I did, I believe, a week or 2 ago. Now, the pros of our approach is it makes it very easy to make your favorite traditional foods, which is part of why the system works so uniquely well for Muslims without compromising on flavor and texture while still getting an easy calorie deficit. Because even if you follow another fitness approach out there that is similar to this one in that it's based on lean proteins, complex carbs, fiber, and low fat to create the deficit, a lot of them are having you eat sweet potato and egg whites. Now, sweet potato and egg whites is definitely an option. There's ways to make it taste great. You can add honey, which is a sunnah superfood, to the sweet potato with cinnamon. It makes it delicious. You can add a little bit of egg yolks to the eggs, just not too much. Otherwise, the fats go too high, and especially if you're cholesterol sensitive. So, you know, if you don't mind egg whites and sweet potato, they are great foods. But if that's all you get to eat, and then maybe a little bit of chicken and broccoli too, yes, it fits the parameters here, but it's not going to work for you because you're going to have to miss out on all your favorite cultural foods. You're going to have to eat all this stuff that has a rubbery texture and you get bored of the taste because it's so bland. We as Muslims, we usually like, you know, some flavor on our food, no matter where you're from. You know, again, most of my audience, like 70%, is Pakistani. So, of course, you know, we love our spices, we love our flavor. And so it's very easy to get that with this approach without feeling like you're on a diet. So that's the beautiful thing here. Because you're doing complex carbs and you're keeping and I forgot to mention low fat and low sugar. And the beautiful thing with complex carbs is it reduces sugar cravings. So your blood sugar is consistent, so you have less sugar cravings. But because your blood sugar is consistent, you're eating protein, lean proteins and complex carbs, your insulin sensitivity improves because you're in a deficit, your sugar cravings go down, and we do avoid sugars, and your energy levels go up. It's very sustainable for all the reasons above. The results are guaranteed, except for in some very rare metabolic disorder cases. But even most, you know, so we have a sisters program as well. I focus mostly on the brothers, but we have a sisters program as well that we put together because there's a couple things actually lined up. Some of our, you know, clients, they wanted their wives to be able to do this, or female relatives of theirs. And then also I had a female nutritionist and a female personal trainer who were following me, who reached out around the time that we were getting all these requests for brothers to sign up their wives because they love the program so much. So we ended up being able to put together this great sisters program with amazing nutritionist, amazing personal trainer, alhamdulillah. So, you know, we have actually worked with a lot of sisters, and of course all of our coaches are certified in FNMS certification, functional nutrition and metabolism specialization. So all of our coaches understand hypothyroidism, understand PCOS, other metabolic disorders that can cause people to be resistant to weight loss, even on a proper diet. So in those cases, though, in most cases, it still works. And we've had plenty of men who are hypothyroid, low testosterone, whatever, who we were able to fix that for, or at least still get them results despite their condition without any medical intervention needed. Alhamdulillah. And of course, sometimes their doctors still put them on a medical intervention, but it's very rare. In fact, there's a lot of people who were thinking about going on TRT who I was able to prevent them from having to go on TRT by Allah's permission, by just optimizing everything else for them. Alhamdulillah. It's actually been very rare. I think we've maybe only had 1 or 2 clients over the years who were on TRT who we weren't able to get off of it. But we've worked with over 1,000 clients, alhamdulillah. So from hundreds of men, even, many of them being in their 40s and 50s, and even, brothers as old as in their 70s, we haven't had to put anybody on TRT, alhamdulillah, in the decade that we've been doing this, alhamdulillah. So the other benefit to this type of diet is that it improves your metabolism and it's easy to transition off of, but you're going to feel so good on this diet with your energy levels, with the satisfaction with how the food tastes and feels, and how full you're able to feel off the fiber, protein, and complex carbs, because those things are filling. They're very satisfying foods. So you're going to face very little resistance. So you may never even need to come off the diet, nor may you ever even need to want to come off of it. Okay, so that's the benefit here, is that you don't even need or want to come off. But if you do come off, it's still very easy to transition off of it because your metabolism is fast instead of being slowed down by the process. And even if your metabolism does adapt and get slower at some point along the journey, especially if you, like, let's say you lose 50 pounds over the next 6 months, your metabolism might slow down because you're 50 pounds less heavy, so you burn less calories moving around, and you've been on a diet for 6 months. So we can easily do a 4 to 6 week reverse diet phase and fix your metabolism, get it fast, and then go right back into weight loss. Now, the cons to this approach, as much as I'd love to say that this is a perfect approach, it's going to be the easiest thing ever, you're not going to have to put in any work, you still got to put in the work. And so it requires meal prep in most cases, unless your wife is down to cook these healthy foods every day. If your wife is down to make some modifications to the food and they still taste good, then of course, it's going to make this a lot easier. And what I always recommend to people is this. If you're a Muslim brother who needs to lose weight, you don't need to eat that much fat. You already have plenty of body fat to produce hormones from, so you don't need to be eating so much dietary fat because you're trying to manage and decrease your weight. However, your children are supposed to increase their weight every single year because they're supposed to grow. So how do you eat the same foods as the family? How do you avoid the pain point and resistance point of having to eat separate foods from the family, which may have been an obstacle for you on these strict diets in the past? Which is another type of Instagram diet, is the strict, bodybuilder diet, which we don't want to do that either. We want to have flavors and enjoy our foods and enjoy the same foods with family. Well, the solution is you prep it the healthy, low-fat way that I teach with the leaner cuts of meat, less oil, everything else, the recipes that we have, the ratios. And then if your kids want to take an extra helping of rice, great, that's great. But on top of that, you just add a little bit of olive oil or ghee, which are healthy fats for children. And your children, whether they're in puberty, whether they're prepubescent, whether they're even post-puberty, but they're trying to bulk up, they're going to get their calories and their fats in so that they're able to satisfy their dietary requirements. However, your dietary requirements are the opposite because you're trying to lose weight and manage your weight year after year instead of gaining weight year after year like children are supposed to because they're growing. So you just eat the low-fat version, you add a little bit extra to theirs after they've already served themselves from the large dish, and it's very easy. So you just have olive oil, just have some ghee in your house, have some olive oil, just don't eat it yourself, only for your kids, and there you go, easy, right? But anyway, so that's the one con, is a lot of times you might have to meal prep, or you may have to slightly inconvenience your wife if she wants to cook if she needs to cook things a bit differently. But honestly, the type of men we work with, they're driven men to where such a little obstacle is not enough to stop them from achieving their ultimate health outcomes, leading a better legacy of health for their families, performing better at work, have more energy, fixing their health, glorifying Allah, taking care of the body Allah gave them. Such a small obstacle would not stop a driven man from achieving such a noble and large result. So most brothers really don't care about this first resistance point. And if you still see this as an obstacle, you can see some of my motivation videos to increase your reason to overcome this resistance. Now, it still requires discipline. There are no hacks. There are no magic pills here. Okay. So again, if you're a driven man, you probably don't mind putting in a little bit of work as long as you know it's going to work, right? And as long as you have the right accountability and, guidance and troubleshooting, expert tailored plan, et cetera, et cetera. So you probably don't mind the discipline. And here is one point that's genuinely an obstacle. You're already busy, you're already stressed. It may be stressful for you to have to track macros on top of all this. So if you don't want to track your macros, but you still want to follow this optimal diet plan strategy that I've successfully used, where 90% of my clients do far better on this than any other thing, more than 90%, then we can do something called meal planning, where we don't necessarily retroactively go back and track and have to account for every little bit of food and measure and all that stuff. Instead, we just plan your meals for you, and all you got to do is prep them or delegate to your wife. So you can delegate the planning to us if you're interested in the program, which again, the link is in the description. However, many of our clients are data-oriented individuals, especially if you're a business owner, you work in tech, or you're an accountant, or whatever field you may be in. Even if you're a doctor, you might like the idea of tracking all of your metrics thoroughly if you're a numbers-oriented individual and you don't find that to be a nuisance or overwhelming, because it doesn't take that long. However, there are many people who find it to be a nuisance, so no problem. We can meal plan instead of meal prepping. Meal planning and prepping as opposed to retroactively tracking. But if you want to retroactively track, it will benefit you, just only if it's realistic for you. It's not required, but it's highly recommended. So those are the only cons. So these diets work great. What I recommend now is check out my other videos where I go deeper into a broad range of relevant topics to the discussion today, including travel, eating out, eating with the family, how to keep it healthy, how to keep it halal. We touch on that, I believe, in some of the videos we actually just came out with, some of the more recent videos. I mean, we touch on that in many of our videos because it's always a relevant factor for Muslims, but I believe especially in the video where I talk about balancing your fitness journey with your busy schedule and travel and everything else, I even have the word travel in the title. That's a relevant video. So I'll go ahead and attach that one below, and you can check out the other videos where I always touch on this, right? Cortisol masterclass, I'll put that in the description as well. And then what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to attach 2 videos you can watch right now. I'm going to put the meal prep video right here, and I'm going to put the reverse diet video right here. So if your metabolism is slow as a result of intermittent fasting, watch this reverse diet video here to help you fix it. And if you need help meal prepping in a time efficient way, here's the video on how to meal prep. Make sure to subscribe, share with a friend, and In Shaa Allah, I'll see you in the next video. Assalamu alaikum.